And good evening, everybody. A very warm welcome to Kaizen Central from Manufacturing TV. I'm Nick Peters, your host for this evening. And this is the February edition of Kaizen Central. We appear every month on the first Thursday of every month at 6 o'clock, and then goes on for an hour. And we let everybody get away spot on 7 o'clock. So we've got a lot to get through. What are we talking about today? We're talking about women in manufacturing, stories of success, and how the stories of success we're going to be hearing about today can help perhaps change the landscape of manufacturing so that young women entering the sector in the coming years will find a changed landscape and find things a little easier. I have to tell you, the reason this all started was that Emily Smith, good evening, Emily, wrote a very good post on LinkedIn that really got me thinking. And rather than try to repeat what she said, what I thought, because it really did set up tonight's conversation, what I thought was, Emily, I'm going to invite you perhaps just to tell us what you put in that post and what reaction you received.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so the post started about the fact that there's only probably about 15% of women in manufacturing. So it was about how the challenges that we face in getting women into manufacturing and comments that have been made. I've had comments made to me about the fact that you can't be a woman and be in manufacturing and be the managing director of a company. So it was about the challenges that we faced, how to get people on board, how I did that, and what the result of that was.
Well, why don't you tell us a bit about your story, Emily? How did you become a managing director?
So my background's actually chartered accountancy. I came in to AVW Fabrications and Michael Smith Switchgear. It was my husband at the time. It was his family business that I joined. So also one of the comments I regularly got was, "You're just the boss's wife. What do you know?" So I spent a lot of time learning about the sector. I actually got my hands dirty and went and got on the shop floor. I got my steel toe cap boots out. And I went and worked with the guys. There wasn't any women on the shop floor at the time. There is now, which is great. And yeah, I just went and saw it from their point of view, and I let them teach me, and I understood it from that side as well. I'd got the experience of working with manufacturers when I worked in chartered accountancy and in practice. So I'd got a bit of background information, and I applied that knowledge into the role that I do now. And we've grown the business quite substantially, which has been fantastic. And earning that respect from people that this lady's come in, she's not just the boss's wife. She does know what she's talking about. She's willing to get her hands dirty. She's willing to learn and prove to them that I should be where I am. But I do think it's much more difficult for women to be able to do that. And that gentleman that came into an interview and said to me, "You can't be a managing director of a fabrication company." And it just got me thinking, and I thought, I want to prove myself. I want to prove to people that I can do this. And I really think we should be looking to the younger generation to get them into manufacturing as well. How we do that is an interesting topic for conversation. I think it's got to start from a young age, particularly at schools and colleges. So that's kind of where I'm going to try and push, and I'm trying to get in with the local universities and colleges and schools to do talks about how we can get women into those roles.
Did he get the job?
No, surprise, no.
Gosh, what a surprise! Absolutely, Emily. I think your story is, I'm sure, is familiar. Before I talk to Rachel, and welcome, Rachel, delighted to see you. I'd like to turn to Alison in Atlanta at Wintec. You're president operations at Wintec, aerospace sector specialist machining company. Alison, what's your experience? How did you get into your job? Tell us your story.
So I stumbled into manufacturing. So, and ultimately I'm glad to have met all of you. But yeah, so I stumbled into manufacturing. It was kind of an accident. I went to school for psychology and criminal justice. One thing led to another, and I was working for Turner Networks in Atlanta, And I was young and didn't get a promotion that I thought I was going to get. And so out of spite, I called my neighbor who I knew owned a small business and said, I want to come work for you. And he said, you don't even know what I do. And I said, it doesn't matter what you do. My dad said I couldn't quit my job until I had a new one. And so he laughed and said, you can come in for an interview, but I can't guarantee you a position. So I came in for an interview. He hired me in to basically file papers. And I thought, I didn't leave a big corporation for this. And I went back to him and said, I want to learn everything I can about this place. And over the next 10 years, I learned a little bit about everything. And before I knew it, in October of 2020, I bought the business from him and with my business partner who's been here for 30 years. So John and I make a really good pair in running the place. And yeah, I mean, Emily's what she's heard, it's stuff I've heard too. I have a little bit of a mouth on me, so I give it right back to people. So that's been my experience.
Well, I'm going to make, I realize that any topic around anything like this is fraught with foxholes, potholes, and one could trip up and break one's ankle very easily in conversations like this. But Alison, where you're from in Georgia, I mean, attitudes to women, I'm just suggesting, may not be even as progressive as they are in the UK. I mean, that's the stereotype, right? I mean, so
absolutely.
What do the guys on the shop floor say to you?
So when I first started at Wintech and I was put in charge of leaning out the manual mill department, well, when you tell a 24-year-old or however old I was, who's never stepped foot on a shop floor, to lean out a department, I was lost. So I was given a crew of 4 journeyman machinists who, thank God, they were so kind to me. They could have easily, brushed me aside and thought, well, here's the, next girl to come in here that we can scare away. But they were kind and they taught me things that I don't know that anybody would have really taught me. But yes, overall, I'd like to think that we've come leaps and bounds ahead of where we were kind of as an area, as a region of the US. I think we're doing better. The conversations that are happening, I think, mean a lot because it used to be very, very taboo and you didn't even really talk about the fact that women weren't manufacturing. It's just they weren't manufacturing. So I think we've come a little bit. We do have a ways to go.
Well, thank you. That's a great story. And I love the payoff. I just bought the company. That's great. Fantastic. Rachel, good evening. Welcome to Kaizen Central. You're new to this and you were invited. It was Philippa Glover who suggested you come on board. Of course, Philippa in her own right is a terrific leader at CNC Robotics. But please tell us your story, if you would.
Hi, so nice to meet you all. Yeah, I'm a substitute for Philippa, poor substitute. But yeah, so I am a commercial director of an engineering company, predominantly we sell woodworking machinery. And it's a family business. And so similar to Emily, I think I set out to prove myself. I went off, did a degree, did a PhD, did some accountancy qualifications, really proved that I was qualified to do the job before I came into the business. So, and I think that's common, and I hear that repeated a lot. So, and I think that's one of the barriers that I am conscious that I think we need to break down for the next generation is the level of qualifications that women feel that they need to go into the same role is much, much higher. So yeah, I think that's an interesting thing for the future. And I love where I am, and I'm very pleased that I did all of those qualifications, but I don't think it should need to be the case that you have to go and do those. It wasn't that anyone else asked me to do it, but I felt I had to.
Well, that's another great story. It's interesting what you touched on something there, which is that I don't know whether it's anything to do with imposter syndrome. In fact, it's not. It's the reverse of imposter syndrome. Well, maybe it is, where women feel that they have to be uber qualified for the job that is set out for the job specs. Men just say, hey, I'll wing it. And so there is a kind, it's not imposter syndrome, because I know that you can do the job. It's just that you set yourselves such high standards that perhaps bloke might just say, I'll see if I can busk this. And we've had a discussion around that. Ram, you'd like to make a comment on that?
Yeah, very much, please. I'm looking at diversity from a different angle, as you can clearly see from my natural tan that I wasn't born here or I didn't grow up here. So as somebody who came halfway across the world from India to the UK to study and to find job, this whole diverse angle for me has been a different challenge altogether. Yes, I am male. Yes, I am straight. Where the part of the country where I come from, I am probably the majority person. But coming into this country, into a new culture, and stealing one of the jobs, for lack of a better phrase, like people say that, and proving why I need to steal the job has been a tough challenge for me. And you know, it's a different kind of a journey, but it's still a journey of diversity. Not taking nothing away from the three exceptional ladies here who are being focused, but I think diversity has a lot more to do, still more in terms of what we are doing. So yeah, that's it. That's my bits for now.
But no, that's absolutely valid, Ram, and I totally get it. And a phrase that's been used many times in other conversations, particularly around LGBT, is unconscious bias, and how just we don't even know we're being prejudicial or whatever. That's the unconscious bit. Sarah, I know that you worked in a major corporation for a long time. It wasn't in manufacturing, but I'm wondering if, I think, was it Vodafone or BT? It was in telecoms, I believe. It is what the stories we've heard from Alison, Emily, and Rachel was similar to what you experienced anyway. I mean, this is not just a manufacturing thing.
No, very much so. So yes, I worked for BT and Vodafone, and throughout my sort of career, I remember I sort of started off with a degree in modern languages, and then when I went to, it seems strange now, but I wanted to get into marketing, and at the time it was an adjunct to sales, so it was the sexy part of sales that everybody wanted to get from sales into marketing. So I ended up doing a secretarial course as a way in. But even when I sort of bust my gut to do all these extra things to sort of move out of a secretarial role and into doing sort of marketing comms at the time, I'd go to meetings and people would, just sort of immediately, I was the only woman in the room and a bunch of guys, and they'd say, "Oh, just want to make the coffees then, Sarah." It's just automatically. They did get a bit of a mouthful, to quote Alison back. I'm quite a strong-willed person, and they didn't get away with that too often. But then even in a variety of sales roles, I worked for 5 years selling into the oil and gas industry, and I remember the look on the guy that I took over from was very technical. He didn't need the technical capacity, but they got used to him. I remember my first meeting, I think it was ConocoPhillips, and they were just like faces. It was obvious. And then the next meeting they said, "Yeah, we're a bit shocked." And I said, "Yeah, I think I noticed that. It was, the look was on your face." But for them, it's all about having a credit. And they said, "Yeah, but it's great to meet with you. You're credible," and I sort of had to earn my stripes and earn my respect. So yeah, although I haven't come from a manufacturing background, certainly in the tech sector, then I'm sure it has changed and got better, but it was very, very tough, and you had to go that extra mile to prove yourself.
Okay, well, thank you very much. What I don't want to do is just to spend too much time, sort of beating up on men or men beating up, on each other or anything like that, because that's just a waste of time. Because what we really want to do is work out, where we go from here. But I just want to spend a couple of minutes, having said that, just to ask some of the guys on the call, does any of this ring true to your experience? Of course it rings true, but does any of it ring true to your experience? And have you witnessed it? Have you even been part of it? I mean, some of us have been around the block for quite a while, and some decades past, the certain assumptions weren't being made. Volunteer anybody who'd like to just talk about that and tell us what they're. I'm gonna actually nominate somebody in a moment if you don't put your hand up. So be very, very careful. Thank you, Adrian. Go for it.
Right, good evening, everybody. I can give you an example. Last year, I did some photography at a fabrication company, and there was a lady there who was sort of middle-aged, and I thought, well, if she's working a CNC machine, she's got to be as good as the guys who are in there. She was on her own, and there was probably 15 or so chaps, and she fitted in very well, and during the 2 days I was there, I didn't come across any untoward comments at all. And I thought to myself, well, good on her. She's learned her trade and she's proved herself as being as good as the chaps. And I think that's a great thing. And because that photography I did was for Made Smarter, she had to be in some of the photographs, demonstrating a woman and a middle-aged lady. She's probably a bit younger than me, probably about 50. But to demonstrate a lady like that in that type of environment, I thought was terrific, really terrific.
Adrian, you make an absolutely terrific point there.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no, you really do, because anybody who's ever had to do anything with websites or pictures of manufacturing, women in manufacturing, do look at all the websites that you'll see, and they will have a common picture in them, which is on Shutterstock, and it's of a young woman wearing a hard hat with a high-vis jacket and a great long ponytail in a manufacturing setting, which health and safety would, I'm sure, not allow, because she's got this girt-long ponytail sticking out the back, and it's the same blooming picture. Now, Adrian, the point I was trying to make is that for young women entering the sector, there's that phrase that Alison used a long time ago in a similar discussion: you can't be what you can't see. And it is about having more representation of women in the sector. There are an awful lot of women contacts I have, and we all have, on social media, and that's fantastic. But I think, when it comes to people on the outside looking in, I wonder if they see enough. I mean, I asked that question of Alison, Emily, and Rachel, and Sarah, well, of anybody, but do you believe that the presence of women in a manufacturing setting is properly represented on things like websites, in things like magazines, and so on? Who'd like to pick it up? One of you pick it up.
I like it when it's real. I dislike it when it's faked. And that's the thing that really bugs me. So we have a female Muslim engineer in our cohort, and I steadfastly refuse for her to become the poster child of all of our marketing, because we want to use it. It has to be. We should take photos of her doing her job to the same proportion that we take photos of everybody else. She's not there to be a poster child for anything in my book. She should be photographed doing her job well, and not be there because we want to make a point.
I know. I think that's spot on. I understand that totally. It's just that I sometimes wonder, if, again, unconsciously, and obviously Adrian's just demonstrated that he consciously took a picture of this lady at the CNC machine, whether unconsciously we just don't represent women enough in manufacturing. Michael, you were first to put your hand up. Good evening to you. Great to see you.
Hi, great to see you guys. I think this is a fascinating debate. I have a friend who runs a business working with schools, working with both boys and girls at primary schools, and getting them to address the bias that starts very early in life, even at 6 and 7 years old, where girls are already believing that they're not as strong as boys, when physically they are actually as strong as girls are as strong as boys. And it goes through to the books that they see. And you say you can't be what you can't see. I'd be completely with Rachel about, somebody shouldn't become the poster person. We shouldn't say poster boy, should we? We should say poster person for the organization. I think that's absolutely right. But we need to go right back to where, as a society, I believe we're programming girls that you should do this and boys that you should do this. And there's a BBC documentary that I saw where there was a guy who was doing this behavioral stuff, and he dressed little baby toddler boys up as girls and toddler girls up as boys, and put them with childminders, and childminders were saying, oh, this little girl likes the doll and this little boy likes the fire engine. And then when they said that's actually a boy and that's actually a girl, and they were shocked that even the childminders were doing it. And it comes to the books, doesn't it, that princesses are rescued, and they're always rescued by a prince on a horse, etc., etc. So it's great that we do it in the workplace. I think the person that Adrian was talking about, and he said she's obviously had to prove herself to get the job, and nobody was saying anything about her not being as good at the job. It's sad to say she's probably had to prove herself further than the guys to get the job and to be accepted, which is absolutely wrong, isn't it? And so I think it does go back to fundamental. I know we're just looking at manufacturing, and maybe I've thrown a big grenade in here, but it goes right back to, change for the next 20 or 30 years and showing the right sort of models to girls. Thank goodness Emily's nodding her head, sorry.
I should say that let's just go back to a couple of stats, because Emily threw a stat out at the beginning. 15% of people working in manufacturing are women. I think, was that the stats? I think it's their estimates vary. It could be anywhere between 50 and 25, something like that. What I find interesting is that in management, women are pretty fairly represented, but as soon as you start getting to the very top, that number comes right down to about 5%. And that I find really interesting. That's why I was so keen to have women leaders on this conversation, because very often, and I know, I was hoping that Laura McBrown was going to join us today, because it's really fascinating how obviously the culture and the influence of the leader is going to dictate what happens in the rest of the business. And if you've got a preponderance of men at the very top, it's going to be tough to change that. Perhaps we could address that about the culture in a second. But Alison, you've got your hand up, and thanks, Michael, for your comment.
Yeah, so no, I agree with a lot of what's being said, but I also wanted to give 3 cheers for a lot of men who they're advocates for these changes. And my business partner, I'm incredibly lucky. My business partner, 3 years ago, we sat in my boss's office to negotiate raises, and I was handling payroll at the time. And so I knew what he made, and my business partner didn't know what I made. And I made substantially less. And I had always chalked it up to the fact that he was here 15 years longer than me. So I thought, okay, well, that justifies that and whatever. Well, over time, we had begun to take on a lot more responsibilities, to the point where he was running half of the business and I was running half of the business. So we sat in that room with my boss and we negotiated raises. And as we were talking about the percent of raise, we went to stand up to leave because we had pretty much gotten what we thought we were going to get. And my business partner wouldn't stand up, and he looked at my boss and he said, "I'm not leaving until Alison makes what I make." And my jaw hit the floor, because that wasn't the plan when we were behind the scenes trying to talk about how this was going to go. And it meant a lot, because he was an advocate all along. He said, "You do have to work and I do have to work. Why should you get paid any differently?" So there are a lot of men out there who, for whatever reason, are fighting the good fight, and they're out there, and I think they just need to speak up.
Great. That's a great story. Thanks, Alison. Emily.
I think I want to pick up on a couple of points. So Michael was talking about it starting young and being at the school age. And I just want to reflect on when I was at school, and it was kind of like the cooking classes were predominantly females, and the design and technology and engineering classes were male. And that was kind of fed through from the teachers that were saying, well, you're a woman, you need to go to the cooking class, and you're a male and you need to go to an engineering class. And there wasn't much openness about the fact that men can cook and women can do engineering. So I think we need to, and this is referring to my earlier comment, getting into schools. And I'm sure there's a shift now. It's been a while since I've been at school, and I don't have children. So I don't have young children. I don't know what it's like now. So I can only reflect based on my own experience. But I really think we need to try and tackle it from that young age, exactly like Michael was saying. Why does a girl have to play with a doll and a boy have to play with cars? It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. And the other thing that I wanted to pick up on as well was the board level comment that Nick, you made. And I think this is across all industries. And when I worked in practice, in accountancy practice, a lot of the boards were male dominated. And sadly, I think that comes back to childcare as well. I think a lot of women don't go for these roles because they have families, or they're frowned upon because they are going to go on maternity leave, or they're going to have families. And I think it's a tough one to discuss and a bit controversial, but I still think that is there, because how can you be at board level if you're not going to be here because you've got childcare issues, or you're going to go on maternity leave? I think we are seeing that starting to iron out. And I've spoke to a lot of people in accountancy practices, and you're starting to see more females on the board and more female directors. But I think we've got a long road ahead to make it more, 50-50.
You raise a really interesting point there, Emily. I'm just wondering if the impact of the pandemic and the fact that we've all become a lot more used to working from home, working in a hybrid environment, maybe will shake loose that prejudice that says, well, you can't possibly be a senior director because who knows, you've only just had one child, you may go and have another, but of course you can be there. We've always, over the last 2 years, everybody's been there, even if it's at the end of a camera. And I'm just wondering if that's going to shake things loose. So maybe we'll come back to that. But Mark, I just want to get to you because you've got a question or a point.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to say was, obviously I've run a manufacturing company in the past, so I'm now running a marketing company. But I've only ever employed down to the attitude and skills of the person I'm interviewing, not their sex or their race or anything else. It's if they're the right attitude and the right skills and the right ambition, then male or female is irrelevant. And I know that in the manufacturing sector, that may not be part of the course. I've experienced something that, we refuse to employ women, which I think is disgraceful. But in my experience, the women I employed had better skills than the majority of the guys in the factory anyway. So they're more productive, they were more ethical, they're more honest, they have better timekeeping skills. And to be honest, if I could have had a factory full of women, I'd have been a happy man. They had done a much better job.
Hey, that sounds good. Rachel, thank you. You got your hand up.
Yeah, it was in relation to the point about childcare, and I think that I'm really passionate about this. That I think we have to make it the norm for everybody to be doing it. So the answer is not to be holding the women back because they have children, but to be encouraging the men to be involved equally, and that's a wider societal thing. So encouraging paternity leave, not just maternity leave, and encouraging, when the child is sick, actually, why is it the mum that's the first point of call from the school? It could just as easily be the dad. And the more that we manage to shift some of those norms, so we've got we've got more men on flexible working to be able to pick their children up from school than we do women. And I think it's making those subtle shifts that start with, yes, it's okay to say that you need to finish early on a Thursday because that's the day that your daughter has ballet practice or whatever that happens to be. And that's a slow and gradual change over time. But I think it's just as important to push back on that is only for the women. We need to make that much more inclusive.
Yeah, my son happens to work for an American company. It's the Bank of New York Mellon, which is actually not a conventional bank. Never mind, that doesn't really matter. But anyway, he works in London for the Bank of New York Mellon. He's got an amazing boss, and he does 50% childcare, and he's encouraged to by the bank, by his team leader and divisional leader, and I'm really, really impressed by that. And again, it's got to be about culture coming from the top, because if it isn't, then but who knows? As Rachel, you made a point saying that as time goes by, I do think there is a generational shift going on. Well, I pray there is one anyway. Ram, sir, you got your hand up.
Yes, hello. Three things really quickly. The first one is with regards to the whole pandemic changing things. I don't think a 2-year pandemic will bring about the massive shift we need in culture. We probably need a pandemic to last for a decade and a half for the existing old school thinking to get into retirement, and the middle management and the lower management, which has just seen the benefits of home working, rise up to those top levels to enforce a cultural change by enabling people from the bottom up. I'm not saying we need a 15-year pandemic, but we need something that long for that, number one. Number two, everything we're talking about today, more women in engineering, the race factor, the sexual orientation factor, the gender identity factor, everything can be taken apart or taken away with one word: merit, full stop. If people and leaders and organizations focused on merit and merit alone, then we don't have to have these conversations about gender identity or women or men or anything. And one final point, I think, to add to what I think Rachel just mentioned, in our family, we have an 18-month-old daughter. And surprise, surprise, it is my name and number that's gone on to the nursery in case there's an emergency, which means I go and attend to it while my wife can do her work. So yeah, fingers crossed, the Shankar family is changing things one baby at a time. Fingers crossed. See what happens.
Well done. That's great. I mean, the merit thing's fine, but that only really works when there is a sufficient number of young, skilled people coming through to the jobs, and that again, that goes back to the education thing. Sarah.
Yeah. Sorry, too much playing with technology. Yeah, I was very fortunate in my sales career because I had a husband who was very happy being the main child carer, and so I was able to make sort of trips to the States. But I do remember when there were times when my daughter, when she was sort of 6 and 7, wanting to me so desperately to do some events with her, and I almost felt ashamed to have to sort of say, oh, I need to take that hour or 2 hours off. Yet the guys around me were, you know, more than happy and, you know, to take that same time. So I think it was an attitude of mind, but hopefully, yeah, I'm seeing things are changing.
Okay, well, I think that's true, and you know, it's bound to happen. I mean, there is a generational shift always going on, and crumbs are, you know, those of us longer in the tooth on this call will remember that there've been 2 or 3 in the last few decades, and this is just the latest iteration. But I think this is a really important one. This is about such a significant change in the way that businesses are run, because I do want to get onto this issue of how businesses run by women, how do they differ, and in terms of culture and perhaps productivity and many other metrics, and if so, how do they differ? Stephen, good evening to you.
Hi. I have to admit, I'm struggling a bit with the conversation, and mainly the reason for that is that most of my professional life has been in consultancy services, professional services. I'm privileged to go into manufacturing companies, so I do see the problems you're talking about here. But I'm wondering, why specifically is the manufacturing sector apparently, well, obviously, let me say obviously, failing to promote women into positions that their talents deserve? I don't see that in other sectors. And I like to think that I myself have, you know, when I've employed people, I've gone for the absolute best people for that particular job. I guess what might have distinguished women versus men in that sort of competition is that some of the women didn't have as much experience, but nevertheless, we were looking for the most talented people. And I would say personally, I've been managed by as many women as men over the years. And similarly, I probably had in my teams as many women as men, certainly not a huge difference. So what is it about manufacturing that is so very different?
I'm just going to throw an extra thought into that. I was looking at some stats about employment of women in manufacturing, and this was not at you know, pay levels or whatever. It's just about gross numbers. And of course, back in the day, there were quite significant numbers of women in manufacturing who were very much in manual roles, and I think that goes to you know, very much probably in textiles and food and all of that, and cheap labor, basically. I mean, it's before automation took over in a lot of these places, and women were a source of cheap labor, and that's, you know, but you know, as they left the manufacturing workforce, you know, we didn't see a corresponding influx of qualified young women coming out of universities. Some, but not enough. Graham, good evening.
I just in support of what was being said about this, Michael said about it starting very young. Was involved with setting up UTC Leeds and still on the board of governors, and that's a specialist school from 14 to 19, focusing on STEM and engineering in our case. And we've, ever since we started, we've been trying to recruit 50% girls into the school. And at the moment, in year 10, which is our input year, we're getting about 20%. And we've taken advice from the WISE organisation, Women in Science and Engineering. We've arranged the brochures and the website to try and encourage girls to come into it, and we're still struggling. So the attitude is clearly set before they get to 14, because they're self-selecting. This is just a school, and there's a small number of girls. Now, going into the sixth form, we lose loads of girls. They go off to other sixth form colleges to do other things other than STEM and engineering. So this is happening. It's not just what companies are doing. The girls themselves are choosing a different route. And I think this really does need to, like Michael said, go right back to the primary schools and exposing girls to different thoughts and different ways. I mean, I used to employ several women in key positions, and I asked them what they did, and every one of them had a father or a grandfather who was an engineer who got them interested when they were a tiny child. It seems that you need someone really close to you to break through the current society taboos, if you like.
Yeah, I think there's, you make an excellent point there, Graham. I'm talking about young women going into degree level courses. It's a fact that more women go to university than men, but fewer go into the kind of courses that would sort of fit them automatically into a career in manufacturing. And again, I think you really hit the nail on the head there, and you're talking about sort of familial structures. I've done quite a bit of reporting on education and manufacturing, and the thought I came up with was that the parents of today, it's their grandparents, sorry, the parents of today. Their parents and quite possibly their grandparents were the ones who suffered the deindustrialization of the 70s and 80s. And when companies were shut wholesale, manufacturing, the heart was ripped out of it. And so there is that strong animus against manufacturing because people have been hurt by it. And then also teachers, they tend not to have, where did their parents come from? What do they know about manufacturing? It's almost culturally. I think it is actually a cultural thing. I know Adrian makes a terrific point about Inside the Factory, which I've seen a number of episodes of. Fantastic that the BBC is running this. But so often you're seeing gigantic factories with only one or two people in them because they tend to use a lot of food factories as their subjects. And, they're virtually all automated. So I don't think the jobs don't look particularly interesting. But I do think that so many of the jobs, if you talk to Lee Howarth down at MCNC in Somerset, have I got that right? Or is it Somerset? Fantastic jobs. They're making such brilliant things. But I do believe it is a cultural issue. And I've got my own thoughts on that longer term, but we'll get to that. Roy Spencer, good evening.
Good evening. I don't think the schools do enough to demonstrate the range of jobs that you can actually get in manufacturing. And it doesn't really matter so much what you study, but it's once post-study, what can you go into? And like one of the previous speakers, I'm a governor of an academy, and what I've been trying to do is to talk to them about the vast range of things you can actually do in manufacturing. Because there's so many things. If you look at the full gamut from strategy to shipping stuff out of the door at the end, you've got all the computer systems, you've got the sales and marketing, you've got all the planning, all those kind of running the systems. So there's lots of scope for people, whether you study computer science, history, economics, accountancy, there are roles there to be had. And as somebody's already said, the example that's set by the leaders of those businesses is really important for actually setting the culture. But we do need to start quite early talking to the pupils about what the potential avenues are. I mean, kids now look at a thing called Unifrog, which actually gives them a pathway to different subjects at university. And then it says, oh, and if you've got a degree in history, you can go into law or accountancy or this, that, and the other. They don't say anything about what it's like to do those jobs. And I think it's incumbent on all of us that have worked or still work in manufacturing to go back and into the schools, if possible, and talk to them about the vast range of things that you can actually do, because you can get to the top of a manufacturing business from a number of different avenues. You grow and develop as you go through the business. And I've met people, excuse me, at the top of businesses that have come from sort of a wide range of things. So obviously it's very technical businesses, you tend to find the technicians at the top, but equally I've seen businesses where, HR and roles like that have actually played and had a massive impact on what's going on. So I think it's the range of things that people can actually do that we need to address.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point, actually, because it's not just that, in order to come and work in manufacturing, a young woman or a girl has to have STEM and have an engineering bent at all. I mean, how often do we actually say that manufacturing generally is just a fantastic place to be and to work, because people are making things and it's so interesting. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be a technician. As you say, quite rightly, Roy, there's so many different avenues you can pursue. Rachel.
Yeah, it was just on the schools front. So I know in the UK, I'm sure loads of you do the STEM ambassador thing anyway, but we have a policy where all of our apprentices, and we're aiming to have 50% of the workforce be STEM ambassadors, because each one of them will have a different role within a school. So I find when I go and talk about things, we do primary schools and secondary schools, and we do job and mock interviews, we do a whole range of stuff. But I find when I go in, I talk about something, and then I went with one of our apprentices and he was like, look at my trainers. Look, they pay me enough to be able to afford these trainers. I wouldn't have spoken about trainers, but that was it. It was like, you can go to university and be in debt, or you can get paid loads by these guys and look what I can wear. And that for us has been that actually what we think a 14-year-old wants to hear is not necessarily what a 14-year-old wants to hear. So the closer you can be in age with those people going in, I think is really important. And it doesn't, and I think, primary school, secondary school, just across the board, as many opportunities as possible.
Yeah, it's funny what you just said there, Rachel. One of the things we're going to be launching this year is a video awards scheme, not to have just a big party at the end of the year. What we want to try and do is encourage manufacturers to take more video, to commission more video, not from us, but from whoever, because they're very poor at self-marketing. We know that. That's a whole different issue about manufacturing. But that said, one of the things we want to do is to get apprentices to make TikTok videos of their experiences, because the people who, we have so many middle-aged people sitting in worthy jobs in STEM companies and whatever, telling young people they should come and work in manufacturing. The people who should be telling them to come and work in manufacturing are their peer group. And so that's why we're doing this. We want to get young kids to really have a bit of fun and make some fun videos, and maybe we can make a bit of a thing about that. Alison, your hand is up, ma'am.
I love Rachel's idea about sending the younger people in to talk to the younger people. We have a teacher that's local that tells her students, drive through the parking lot, and if you like their cars. So it's the same idea. It's that same trying to get to the level of what's gonna touch that kid, right? There's and I think, Nick, to your question earlier about what sets a company apart being woman-led, or what differences or what positive changes can be made, I think a lot about this. A few years ago, we implemented something where at the end of the year, I have one-on-one meetings with all my employees. We have about 50 of them. And it's just to go over benefits and make sure that they know they have what they think that they have. We offer 401k, things like that. So we can just kind of go through things one-on-one. And I intended for that to be literally what I just said, just a one-on-one. Is this what you think you have? Okay, sign here. Thanks very much. Have a great Christmas. And it turned into something a lot more. It turned into what was supposed to be 15-minute meetings, turned into 30 and 45 minutes of people telling me their life stories. And we had a box of tissues out because there were tears. And it made me wonder, if I were a man, would those conversations have been happening? I don't know. Maybe they would have, but I feel like a lot of the male employees feel more comfortable telling a woman certain personal stories or certain things that may give us as leaders better context to them on the shop floor.
Very interesting. Thank you, Alison. Sitting there in first class, as always, is Lee Howarth. Good evening, Lee.
Good evening, everybody. Fantastic conversations as ever. Females in engineering is something that we at MC&T are trying our best to advocate and encourage young people. All along, I've said that we need to go back to roots, go to primary, secondary schools. And I've said how many schools literally have a woodworking shop, a technician shop anymore, a craft shop. One of these fine ladies mentioned about home economics class. Because I'm dyslexic and was a bit quirky, I was the only male in the home economics class. I was the only male in a particular group in art. And I did go into metalwork, woodwork, and craft and design. The point I'm trying to make here is that we need to go back. So we held, after being inspired by Alison's virtual internship and Angela Lawler's Leeds and Bradford festival that they did, we held our first event, and we invited every single school in the county to a 2-day open event where they could see jet-powered surfboards, flying cars, hill climb sports cars, cutaway jet engines, 3D printing, 5-axis machining, 3D scanning. So we were scanning their faces. We showed them the whole process, and the message we were trying to portray is it's not just being like I was, a machinist. I've now developed to become a business development guy, a sales guy. It's taken me here, there, and everywhere. I've seen amazing things. And I think it was Roy that mentioned there is more to manufacturing than hammers and sparks. You name it, we make it. So whatever interest an individual has, whether it's fishing, horse riding, motorsport, computer gaming, everything needs to be designed, manufactured. And like you said, somebody mentioned about the trainers. We have an apprentice, Ewan. He's just coming out of his time. He can be signed off this year. He got the keys to his first house. He's 21 years old. He's got a mortgage. So to get that message out there now, he's getting ready to move out and go out into life.
That is
university, great. Apprenticeship, training, no debt. So, and we're training him up even more. So he's next in line to become a production cell leader, which will be promoted. So we try and recruit from within. And the best response we got at this festival were from the young females, the 12 to 14-year-olds. But unfortunately, education, the message we got back from one school was, great idea, sounds brilliant, but we don't teach engineering, so we won't be attending. And it's just mind-blowing. So fingers crossed, we're going to get more oomph out of it. We're doing marketing and videos to try and promote it. So my goal is to raise the numbers from 300 students that attended over 2 days to 1,000 over 2 days. That's so going to go for it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a great story, Lee. And quite apart from the fact the next time I'm in Somerset, you can make dinner for me, because I'm sure you've got all the right skills for that. Do please send me the videos, because we'll put them out. We'd love to show them on Manufacturing TV. Thank you, Emily. You have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the culture point. Now, the business has been established a lot longer than I've been there, and they've never really focused on well-being and mental health. And it was something that I'm quite a big advocate for. So picking up on what Alison was saying, and I've learned things about the staff because they've come into my office and I've got the trusty box of tissues on my desk that they've confided in me, that they've not confided in the last director or my co-director because they're male. And I think there was that barrier there. But not only that, there is a company around the corner from me, without naming them, that is very similar. We do very similar things. That is led by a male. And people prefer to come and work for us because of the culture that we've created. Now, I have been the lead on that, but I've created it with the team. So that could be simple things like we provide a fruit box on a Monday morning so the lads can come and get a piece of fruit. Or it could be that we've just got 6 mental health first aiders, me being one of them, just to create that really nice culture. And the other key thing is development. I really push professional development and CPD. So I've supported a CPD scheme. Before there was nothing, they'd come, they'd do their job. There wouldn't be any sort of training, development, progression. So I spent a lot of time working to make sure that they've got that development. So although we don't pay as well as the company around the corner, we do retain our staff because we've created such a positive culture. So I think that's really key as well.
Bob Gibbons just put a really interesting note in the chat box. He says, we talk about skills and yet 50% of the productivity equation is to do with effective well-being. And I think that is that really is about, I remember Jürgen Meyer talking about before he came out as gay and then afterwards, and he said the ability to bring my whole self to work. And I think that if work offers you an opportunity to be your whole self and also takes care of your whole self, not just do your job and leave your emotions, leave your problems, leave your dietary requirements or whatever at the door. You come in here and that was the old way. And to hear what Emily's doing, no wonder people want to come and work for you. And of course, that well-being issue that Bob's just mentioned, of course, you're bound to get more from people who feel that you're giving an awful lot to them as part of their daily lives, as part of their daily work life. One thing I'm really conscious of is that we sit and talk around these things on Kaizen Central. We've touched on this and many other similar issues in the last couple of years. And I'm always left feeling frustrated that we have no manifesto to sort of march out of the door with and to say, right, okay, barricades, we're going to take it to the man. It's just not going to happen, is it? But I think we can obviously spread awareness, and maybe it's just about raising our own individual energy levels and feeling affirmed about why this is such an important thing to do. We've got things going on in our business that I'll be briefing about in a few weeks' time, and maybe that will also help channel some of this energy, because we really do believe that in order for us as our business to fulfill, this is going to sound weird to people who haven't been around Kaizen Central for very long, but our big, hairy, audacious goal, which is to make manufacturing a central pillar of UK economic planning, we're not going to get there if we can't demonstrate that there is that tremendous muscle has got the power to work at its full capacity. And manufacturing is the muscle of this country, and it needs every single bit of energy, talent and enthusiasm that there is out there, but we've got to attract it in. And so that is very much part of us fulfilling our mission. Right, we've got 5 minutes left before I head downstairs to my famed bottle of Malbec. How could you say it was Merlot, Mr. Murphy, in a post the other day? Seriously, man, come on, get a grip. It's either real ale or it's Malbec.
Merlot. Merlot is the base grape of Chateau Petrus, yeah? Okay? And you just do not get fancier than Chateau Petrus. Malbec is that sort of funny foreign stuff,
You may be absolutely right, sir, but I'm talking about my preferences and not yours, and what waits for me downstairs. Okay. Anybody else got some thoughts they'd like to throw into the hopper? As I say, we've got 5 minutes, and I just want to thank, before we go anyway, Emily, Alison and Rachel for sort of stepping up on this. But Rachel, this is your first time in this particular group. Just wondering if you've got any thoughts about the conversation, about the energy that you've felt, and some of the responses.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And Adrian, I think, was waving a hand for a question, so I'm not going to take it right on.
Oh, he was. Put your little yellow hand up, sir.
That's my hand.
Okay, sorry, Rachel. Do continue.
It was just yeah. I think all it takes. You don't know that one of my mottos in life is you never know the influence that you have on one person. So, and I think if you just go through life trying to have impact on people, you don't know the tiny changes that you've made along the way. So I have a very close friend who tells a very powerful story that she saw someone hadn't seen in about 6 months, and she just waved at them from the other side of the street and then carried on walking. And then about a month later, that person said, I was on my way to commit suicide. And that wave showed me that somebody cared, and I didn't. And that's sometimes all it takes is a wave. And I think, if you have that level that something, all it takes is a wave, all it takes is a nudge to somebody in a primary school, all it takes is a casual mention of work experience, then we can make huge ripples in life. And you might not ever know the influence that you've had on somebody. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Very well said. Beautifully said. Thank you. Adrian, I'm sorry, you were I didn't see your hand.
That's all right. Don't worry, Nick. I was just going to ask the ladies who run workshops. Number one, the ladies that you employ, are you actively using them to try and inspire to inspire other ladies to come and work for you? And I know, Emily, you said something about a plan to go and talk to schools. Have you started that yet? And if you have, has anything come of it as yet?
No, I've not managed to start it yet. It's something that I've got on the agenda for this year, but I'd happily provide feedback once I have started it.
Okay, right.
Okay, super. And Ram, I think, I thought he was putting his hand up. He was actually saying he had to go. He's got to put his little one to bed, which is great. Okay, any more thoughts in the final couple of minutes? If not, I'll let everybody go. But I just want to thank you all anyway, and for bringing, as always, this tremendous energy that we have at Kaizen Central. I'm really, really thrilled and delighted, as always. Any more thoughts, final thoughts? Alison, I'm going to offer you put you on the spot. I always do this. If I need someone to talk, well, I'll just ask Alison. She'll come up with something.
I really like the Rachel's last thought, the make the impact on one person. And if some of you have daughters or nieces or sisters, consider them along the way, and whatever you're doing in the name of humanity in general, you're doing it for all of us.
Actually, I will put you on the spot again, Alison, because you made mention just earlier about the virtual interns. We've got a couple of minutes. I just think, can you just give us a quick elevator pitch so that everybody can understand it, those who have not been part of this before?
Sure. So thank you. So COVID made us change our in-person internships to a virtual version back in the summer of 2020. It was very successful. We went ahead and did a 2021 version, and now we're going to do a 2022 version. It's basically 4 weeks, an hour every day, where we have a different topic in manufacturing. So everything from engineering design, which the very famous Ram is our featured speaker for the 3rd year in a row. And he's always a hit with the students. Supply chain, metallurgy, you name it, there's all different types of things. This time we're featuring some food processors, some aerospace manufacturers. And the idea is high school juniors or seniors, so 17, 18-year-olds come on and get a little bit of everything when it comes to manufacturing. So I think was it Adrian or someone else that said, the kids don't know what's out there. So if you don't know what's out there, then how would you know what's out there? So this is the intent is to connect students to not only potential careers, but potential professionals who want to be future mentors. And that has been kind of an accidental consequence of the program, is many of the professionals have stayed in contact with a couple of the students. One ended up getting a real internship with SpaceX as an unintended consequence. So it's a lot of fun. It's about 15 students. It's open to everyone. So I put the link in chat. If anyone's interested, please share the link. We'd love to have them.
Yeah, I think that is the kind of game-changing program that we need to get a grip of in this country. And I know there are some moves to do that. So Alison, bless you with that. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Rachel. And again, Alison, and thank you all for being with us. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. Hope you felt stimulated by the conversation. As I say, if we, as Rachel said, if we just take some of the energy and pass it on, who knows what that tiny pebble might produce. But bless you all for being with us. Thank you. Anybody who's new to this, I'll send you. You're now on the BCC mailing list, and you get notifications of the next one. So I do hope you'll join us again. Thank you all. Take care. Have a great evening.
Bye, everybody.